operations of viscose via smart technologies. And some of the takeaways from the dialogue, we looked at the challenges to the adoption, required policies, and impact on customers. And it was actually a very interesting one. And I could remember that most of the questions that came up were, where's the money? And today we'll be looking into the fund, we'll be looking at the funding of these smart technologies and how they can improve on-grid performance. So anchoring this section is not another person, but an experienced energy transition leader and program director with over 13 years of expertise, and he's at the forefront of the evolution in Africa. He's the head of sustainable energy access at the Nigerian Energy Support Program, NESP, a 48 million euro budget and the largest European Union and German government and funded energy program. He's responsible for establishing collaboration, projects, coordination, planning, budgeting, and directing. He has been involved in international development programs across sub-Saharan Africa, especially in the power sector, and supported the successful implementation of consultants and supported the successful implementation of major energy programs like the WPNEP, AFDB, UNDP, GIAP, etc. He's a versatile consultant, seasoned engineer, and experienced project leader. He's a recognized expert on many great topics with extensive training in electrical engineering, industrial engineering, and mastery in engineering management from the University of Sunderland, UK. His experience and leadership have brought many businesses to profit with extensive knowledge in business growth, renewable energy market expansion, and financial modeling. With a round hand of applause, please also make welcome Odumide Fatoki.
Is my mic on now? Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. And so exciting also because I think the last time I was here will be like some 3, 4, 5 years ago, probably before COVID. It's just always very tough getting out of office in the evening time like this. So I'm really excited to be here. No, I'll sit. So for now, let me stand. All right. The conversation this evening is quite interesting. And very soon, I'm just going to be bringing up the panelists that will be sharing the topics together and kind of unpack some of the things that the earlier moderator mentioned. So with your permission, I would like to sit now, and then I will bring up all the other panelists. So the first person I want to bring to the seat is Mrs. Folake Soetan, and I will just take a quick citation. Folake Soetan is an executive business leader with over 22 years of professional experience in managing startups, sales and marketing, and change management, and over 14 years in leadership roles. She has a proven track record of successfully transforming struggling businesses into growing, competitive, profitable companies. Her experience spans the aviation, oil and gas, and power sectors. She's a board member of the Women in Energy Network, an association established to provide a platform for women working across the energy industry value chain, and the Chief Executive Officer of Ikeja Electric PLC, the largest privately run distribution company in sub-Saharan Africa, and the foremost in Nigeria by revenue and innovation. Mrs. Soetan oversees the ongoing transformation, earning the company remarkable recognition by demonstrating our core beliefs of teamwork and collaborative leadership focused on building and leading high-performing teams and cultivating a professional and result-oriented culture to accelerate growth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me this evening, Mrs. Folake Soetan. All right, so very quickly, I go to the next panelist tonight. In person of Mr. Akim Saka. Akim Saka is the Energy Finance Team Lead at Meristem Wealth Management Limited. It drives the implementation of the Central Banks of Nigeria's intervention in the Nigerian electricity supply industry through the CBN's own SPV, NESA Stabilization Strategy Limited. He was an advisor for the CBN's National Mass Metering Program, Phase-0, to roll out 1 million meters to bridge the metering deficit. He managed the disbursement of the 50 billion out of the program size of about 59 billion. Akim is a result-oriented development finance professional focusing on energy finance and on-grid and off-grid energy. His professional expertise covers financial reporting and audit of the company's financials, monitoring of disclosed collections, and providing policy support for other recipient intervention in the Nigerian power sector. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a round of applause for Mr. Akim Saka as he comes. You're welcome. And last but not the least, Phil Roberts. Phil Roberts is the Chief Commercial Officer at Steamaco. He's focused on pioneering a new future for the African energy sector with smart IoT technology that stops ATC and C losses, gets utilities paid, and wins consumers' trust. He has over 20 years of executive board experience across tech startup and corporate marketing. He's a strong sales and marketing professional with an MBA and a diploma in regulated financial planning. Phil is skilled in vision and strategy development, senior level relationships, F2F, digital solutions, contact centers, CX, people development, negotiation, business planning, smart IoT platform for utility sector, FMCG, B2B, automotive, and technology sector, sales, and business development. Once again, a round of applause as we welcome Phil to join us. You're welcome, Phil. Yes, I think we can give a round of applause once again for all the panelists as they are comfortably seated. And then as we go into the discussion and conversation tonight. All right, I know our time is fast spent, so I'm just gonna jump right in. We know the topic before us today. We're looking at funding smart technologies for on-grid performance and improvement. And I think this piggyback on the last edition where they were now talking about these smart technologies and the role they can actually play in the sector. Of course, you know, revenue collection is a critical component of any business. You must see where the money is coming from. At the same time, you must also see where the money that will produce the money is also coming from. So I think what we're discussing here today is quite important. So I'm just going to start very quickly by just taking maybe a quick round from all the panelists. I'm going to start with Folake. I mean, just to give a bit of introduction into the entire national mass metering program itself, your understanding of the entire program and what you see as the aims and the objective. Before we start going into like the deep dive, other questions, just a general overview of the entire program. What's your perception about this? So over to you. Is it working? Okay, so there's a slight technical issue here. Yes.
All right. Okay, am I good? Okay, good evening, everyone. You guys, you're not happy to hear us. Enough that we are on the spot, so please give us some right energy, please. Anyway, it's my pleasure to be here this evening. I think I was here about 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago. I can't remember, obviously before COVID. So I'm happy to share some of my experience with regards to national mass metering. Okay, a bit of background. So the national mass metering program, I think, was critical and necessary to happen based on what the government was trying to achieve. So I'll backdate to COVID. Now, when COVID happened and everybody was forced to be at home, what it literally meant was that it showed everyone the importance of power. And the discos were heavily impacted because we were forced pretty much, well, not forced, we were asked to make sure power was made available, obviously for the hospitals, for the kids that are at home, that are schooling, people that are working. So we did that. But the flip side was we couldn't recover the revenue from all the energy that was consumed during that period. And it became very apparent that metering was critical. as all of you must know, metering is a device that helps you be able to account for energy and be able to help you either bill accurately and of course also collect your money. So if you don't have that device, you would have to estimate. And if you're estimating, what it means is that you have to physically get human beings to either go and disconnect customers or get customers to pay, which is not very efficient. So like I said, the COVID made that apparent. And as such, the intervention program kind of started from that whole COVID time, whereby the government and all the stakeholders in the sector, in the NESI, came together to look at what are the critical issues and how can we solve that. At the time, there's a major liquidity issue in the disco space, and every disco pretty much spoke about the importance of metering, but of course we didn't have the funds to do that. And as such, the government decided that they were going to assist the discos with metering by providing the funding that would help us be able to meter our customers effectively. Hence, it's called the National Mass Metering Program. Now, before that time, obviously there was CAPME, there was MAP. MAP is meter asset provider, whereby customers are the ones that are paying. But obviously, that is not as effective as you think you are rolling out to all the customers. And as such, that's how the National Mass Metering came about. I think maybe in the course of time, we'll speak more about that, but that's the genesis behind that. And I would say that it was a very good initiative because if you think about the different upsides, the discos had liquidity issues, someone was ready to provide intervention fund. I'd been good giving you moratorium, that's a good one. Finally is, if it's massively produced and you are deploying, you are not depending on customers that can afford the meter. You're actually going to deploy the meters in places you can recover your money. So if you think about the objective, it was good, but obviously he had his challenges, and we'll talk about that, I guess, in the costs of the meter. So that's pretty much it in a summary from me.
Thank you very much, Malaka. And I think that even presents a very good background to what we're discussing today, because objectives has to be very clear. And I love the part where you even said the government saw the need to come into the process. I'm aware of the metering assisted program or the acceleration program that was initially, kickstarted, but that didn't really achieve much because it pushed the responsibility to the consumer in one way or the other. But somehow, because I was hearing a lot of feedback then that where do they expect people to raise money, especially manufacturers, because they have to be the one to make it available. And then government stepping in, I think it was a game changer. So let me move very quickly to you. I mean, you've worked with CBN, and I know that this all government intervention on that side is actually CBN is playing a critical role. But even before we deep dive into the real operation, I wanted to check with you, what do you foresee were the bottlenecks for this scheme itself?
Just a bit of background. I think before COVID, I used to come here and I was on the other side of the table, and it feels good to be on this side of the table. So, going into the program itself, I think we all have an idea of the previous metering schemes in the country. I think Ms. Falaka already mentioned CAPME and the MAP program. But the National Mass Metering Program in the history of the NESI, I think, is the largest, biggest, the most ambitious. And I think we need to give kudos to the Central Bank of Nigeria for coming to intervene in the sector. Be that as it may, I think the National Mass Metering Program itself, from my experience, the players within the industry were not particularly prepared for such large-scale deployment of meters within the NESI. And so it came with different issues here and there and all of that. From my experience, I think I will just share a little bit of those bottlenecks. Number one is the issue of capacity, right? I know NEC, the regulator, also wanted to have some bit of local content within the industry. And so there was that 30% requirement and all of that. But the truth is, even the local manufacturers don't really have that capacity to scale up that fast, right? And so when we deployed, the meters were meant to be, at customers' premises within a period of 6 months, but because of capacity issues, also it was deployed, the program started around the COVID era, and so you also have supply chain issues internationally, get the local manufacturers getting supplies into the country, and then even getting the critical components, right, the chips and devices from China and all of that. So that creates a little bit of bottlenecks, but I think we also have few local manufacturers, right, that could manufacture those components in country, but still they still have those bottlenecks. And so a program that was meant to be concluded within a 6-month period, ended up, lasting up to about 24 months. And then, when we see like, okay, this thing is continuing and, we are not having an end in sight, we are very tough on, I don't know, Ms. Folake, some of your team members, we're on this weekly calls, and like, we're always very harsh and all of that, like, so you guys need to get these things, in order. So the capacity is a bit of a constraint for local manufacturers. Also, I think on the part of the regulators, what we noticed also was, for the industry generally, right? And I'm not speaking for the regulators, but for somebody who is outside and trying to see, from the money part and trying to say, okay, if we deploy this thing needs to bring the returns back. What we've seen is that for the industry generally, there is no standard specification for meters, right? And so you have maybe 11 discos, and maybe across the 11 discos, you now have 4 categories or 5 categories of meters and all of that. And to the best of our knowledge, I don't think there is anything about smart metering specifications within the industry. Of course, I think some discos on their own initiative say, okay, they're going to deploy smart meters. And for those set of discos, they also had issues, related to net connectivity, SIM cards, and all of that. But, if you're going to deploy meters on such a large scale, I think, you need to have mechanisms to ensure, we know the kind of country we are, like issue of bypass and all of that, right? So if you do have those sort of smart meters and co, of course, like, you deploy the meters and you're not getting the returns, right? Of course, connected to that are the ancillary products to having those meters, right? So if you're going to deploy smart meters, you also want to have advanced the AMI in place. Well, from my experience, not all discos have such capability, and so those were constraints. And I think from the media, we also read that some discos went out and say, okay, a certain percentage of their meters have been bypassed. And what that means is that the revenues that the meters were meant to generate is not going to be there, because if you install a meter that costs, say, 60,000 naira, or maybe 100,000 naira, and then there is a time that you expect to get the returns from the meter. Well, 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, the meter is not generating any revenue, so that's already a loss. So there has to be some mechanism to, there wasn't any mechanism to actually track the meters, right? What the meters are doing, right? And then also in terms of, actually even deploying the meters on whether smart or no smart, right? I think I already mentioned the issue of capacity, right? So that's on the production side. On the installation side, right, there was also those issue of, not having enough manpower, right? And what we saw was certain meter manufacturers had to go into investing in manpower development so that you have enough installers to go around and putting those meters on the walls. I think I would like to stop here, in terms of the bottlenecks around, deployment of meters in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for Akim. And I think it then presents an opportunity to turn over to Phil, right? So we've seen the objective, we've seen the need for this program. And from what Akim just highlighted now, there are bottlenecks. And what I heard expressly was capacity. And so from your perspective, I want to hear what do you think, or how do you think this particular scheme can be improved? You know, from maybe manufacturer's perspective, from technology perspective, even addressing maybe some of these issues around capacity, because I believe that smart meters are supposed to live up to the expectation of being smart. And that will mean taking out some of these bottlenecks that are rightly highlighted by Hakim. So can we hear your perspective on this? How do you think this scheme can be improved?
Well, any scheme has to firstly solve the problem. And there's a number of high value problems in Nigeria around the power sector in terms of collection efficiency, in terms of commercial losses, in terms of technical losses. So number one, the solution that you put in place has got to solve that. And number two, any funder, be the government or be the World Bank or be it private funders, are going to want a return. And so therefore you have got to be able to deploy an asset in a way that it's going to provide that return. And so our observations on maybe the learnings from what's happened in the past is that any asset that gets deployed is going to have to be firstly tracked through its installation process and then monitored throughout the life of it. And from that, you can then detect where people are not paying you, detect where there is theft, detect where there is tampering, but also inform yourself where you may have a difference between technical loss and commercial loss. And so I think all of the programs need to think hard about, we can get onto capacity, but I think capacity is solvable. Whereas if something is being deployed and the asset is being deployed and it's not smart, much has happened in phase 0, then you are investing in an asset that's not going to provide a return because unfortunately that is easily compromised through theft and you can't then detect that. So I think very much the learnings we've had by investing into pilots with the grid companies is that where you deploy an asset, make it truly smart and monitor it, then you can achieve the return on investment that's available.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I think what you said is really, really valid. So let me quickly turn to Folake now. So now we've heard about the startup, the phase 0, but now phase 1. So I wanted to check with you, how do you see the program currently ongoing now? I mean, talking from the discourse perspective, someone who has also been in the market as a player, what do you think is the status of the program? How successful can you rate it now? Or what are the things that you feel that probably can still be tweaked here and there in order to make it more successful?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I think I'd like to build from him first. And some of the things you, at least from your perspective, saw as challenges. Yeah, they were challenges, but I see them differently. I saw them as opportunities. And so what do I mean? If you look at how meters have been deployed over the last 10 years or even 15 years, the discos have not had the opportunity to deploy it as much as the national mass metering give the discos the opportunity to do that. However, the central bank being deliberate about 30% local content is a good thing because you want to encourage that capacity development in Nigeria. Yes, did we have it? No, we did not. But did we have local manufacturers who have assembling plants? Absolutely. Did we have people who wanted to develop assembling plants? Absolutely. Did it give opportunity for us to then begin to develop resources with regards to installers? So they're graduates or people that are going to technical schools, they're training schools that developed because of that opportunity that came about. So yes, it was a challenge, but I believe that we overcame and we're still dealing with those challenges by creating opportunities. So I know that, for example, with regards to either the discos or installers or the meter manufacturers, they have had to double up on their installation capacity, right? Because they know that phase 1 is 4 million meters, phase 0 is 1 million meters, and those 1 million meters are meters that are in country. So because it's in country and you certify that it's in country, it's giving them time to very quickly begin to ramp up, look for funding opportunities, show that we can perform and get external support to develop them. So I want us to look at it from that perspective, even though those challenges were there, because not as if we just saw the challenges of the meter manufacturers, saw the challenges and just sat there. No, of course not. So I think it's important we see that, because obviously, even looking at Nigeria as a developing country, and you have different things they're trying to do. So that's one. For phase 0, because it was in country, the reasons that the discos couldn't really maybe access those meters as effectively is because they couldn't really pay them on time. Now that the meter manufacturers know that I will be guaranteed payment, they are encouraged to place orders to replace those meters. 1, 2, they're encouraged to work closely with the discos to help them be able to, first of all, how do you effectively deploy these meters? What are the gaps? So when I look at lessons learned during CAPME, during MAP, what are the major challenges? Customers, they payment into your account. They couldn't trace it. So that means there was a long lead time for us to install. So that's a bad customer experience. You're not achieving the objective. So in understanding that problem, at least my disco, and I know some other discos, we're able to come up with a platform that allows the customer, first of all, you capture information about the customer, you coming up with a payment reference that ties your payment to your booking, which has solved the problem that we had before. And as such, that problem of a customer has paid and takes a long time, or a customer is in your system and you're not able to deploy on time, it's kind of reduced. And as such, we're ready for at least, I think phase 1. I think that the fact that also, I still commend again, the fact that with the other alternatives where either the disco is funding or you are depending on your customer to fund the meters for you, what it means is that you're not able to deploy the meters strategically. So what do I mean? Today, you want to be able to optimize revenue. So you have a service-based tariff model where you have band A, band B, band C, band D, band E. Band A is 20 hours and above. So logically, you want to close out your metering on band A that has the highest tariff level, right? So that you have minimal losses, you know that your problem is that you're optimizing there and you have enough cash flow to be able to improve infrastructure on band B, right? But if you are depending on either your customers to pay, not all of your customers in that particular bucket that will pay you. So on a feeder, you want to close out 100 meters, maybe 20 are willing to pay. So you deploy 20, but with the national mass metering, because you have those meters in bulk, it helps you be able to install strategically, and you are, gradually minimizing your losses. And at the same time, because those meters, at least for us, are smart, and you're also coming up with technologies and working with people like Phil to help you be able to also detect some of those bypasses or some of those issues. Yes, technology is evolving. Let me put it that way. Yes. But like I said, I don't like to see the problem. I like to see that it's opportunities for us to be able to come up with creative ways. So NMP Phase 0, I think, did a fantastic job for us to be able to at least install the meters in strategic locations to optimize revenue and minimize losses. Like I said, I think NMP Phase 0 also showed opportunities to other potential meter manufacturers who now see that, okay, if this continues, I have skin in the game because I'm guaranteed of the payment terms work, and I can do this. So there's that advantage. Of course, the disadvantage is, of course, the delay or the problem. Some of the problems with the delay in the money coming up, and in terms of being paid by central bank, and of course the fact that the meter prices are fixed, and there's inflation, there's forex, and some of those components are imported. So if you're going to be affected by forex, then how do you recover that difference? So the meter manufacturers are also kind of not encouraged to. So like I said, it's a problem, but I think we're sitting down with the stakeholders to try and also solve that problem. So even though Phase 1 has not started, I'm excited about that. You're here at CBN. If you can help push that, it will help I think the disco is great. Thank
The
you.
round of applause for the panelists so far. And I think I'm kind of enjoying the conversation. And then one of the things why I love this kind of forum when you get all the players in is everybody is able to pick his own part. And then you find out that someone's output is actually someone else's input. And so I'm going to come back to you right now. So, because when you were mentioning the issue of capacity, in my head, I was just thinking, how can capacity be a problem in Nigeria that has high unemployment rates, right? There are people who are clamoring every day, I don't have jobs. What can be done, to effectively, use that as a platform to provide jobs to those people? So like you, I kind of share the same thought that rather than seeing those things as problem, we can even see them as opportunities, right? To kind of, restructure things and then to be able to get the best value out of it. So let me come back to you now. Phase 0 is out. Phase 1 is almost like in play now, right? Looking back into some of the challenges and the bottleneck that you have mentioned earlier on, what role or what are you guys doing right now in order to be able to kind of combat some of those challenges? And how can you work more closely, right, with, the actors, like some of the things that Folake had mentioned right now, to ensure that you overcome those challenges and you don't roll them into the phase 1, because it seems to be a larger one than phase 0, and there's a need to be able to use, every program has got its own team problem, or that time that you need to, itemize some of the challenges and overcome those challenges in order to improve and make it more efficient. So how are you going to make phase 1 more efficient? So maybe that would be a best way to put it. Yeah. I know it's like hotspot.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, and thank you for also making some points to what I said earlier. I think what I'm going to say now is going to come as a surprise to most of us, and please don't shout or don't no, don't panic, please. Yeah, I'm sitting here. We've done some work with central bank, but I'm not sitting here as central bank. I think that needs to be clearly stated because I've had so I'm not the guy with the money. So, but of course, we play some rules, we get the money, but I'm not the one giving out the money and all of that. Of course, we advise. Number 2 also is, I think from what has been said so far, there's this clamor for phase 1 and all of that. The truth of the matter is, there hasn't been any public statements or anything about phase 1. Right, when phase 0 started, the idea was, okay, phase 0, then from phase 0 we'll go to phase 1, which is going to be about 4 million meters, and then you go to phase 2 and all of that. Those were the concept notes. But given the challenges and of course the opportunities from phase 1, from phase 0, of course, we need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, if you're going to be advising the CBN on how best to go about another metering scheme, of course, given the challenges of trying to deploy 1 million meters meant to last between 3 to 6 months, end up spanning over 2 years, and they want to now scale up to 4 million meters. Of course, if you don't want to experience those issues that we had, we really need to go back to the drawing board and really put out, go back and say, okay, what do we really need to do to combat some of those challenges, right? Now, being that said, if as an individual and from my experience within the sector, I were to say, okay, yeah, phase 1, CBN, oh yeah, let's start phase 1. Number 1 thing that I would insist is for the regulator to come out and say, all these schools must have the capability to deploy smart meters. Because it came to us as a shock when we read on the pages of newspapers that we funded a certain number of meters and they've been bypassed and all of that. It means that money has gone down the drain. So if you had to come in and say, phase 1, we are starting all of that, even if there is not going to be any other, requirement and all of that, all these schools must have the capability to, deploy smart meters, and we are talking about AMI. Now, how many schools have AMI? Well, so rather than okay, so
Short fire.
So now, number 1 is there are certain things that I have to look at. It's not just about deploying meters. The places that you are deploying meters, do you have the capability to even recover those funds? There are areas within this country, even if you put smart meters there, they will not bypass it. But instead of people vending, or you are in your office, you are saying, okay, yeah, the meter is there, but it's not consuming energy. But you can't go into the community and say, okay, you want to go and check what is happening. Okay, this meter is not reading and all of that. So one of those things that I'll probably do is, discos really need to come up with their installation plan enumeration. Not all. Now, one of those challenges we had was enumeration. So you want to meter this place, you get there, okay, this customer needs one phase, okay, you get there, it's 3 phase and all of that. You have those challenges. So if you want to deploy your meter, you have to know where you are going to. Do you have the assurance that you are going to recover your funds from this area? There are some places in this country, you can't even go into those communities to say you want to disconnect or anything, and you are going there to go and put smart meters. What for? So, coming from the financial side, if you are going to go into phase 1, I want to be assured that, yes, this investment is going to yield the required benefits. And to Mrs. Folake, sure, this may also come as a shock to you, what I'm going to say. But from my experience, I'll probably also want to minimize DISCO's involvement in the installation, because on the phase 1, DISCOs actually had a lot of control. Who is the person who is the map that is going to deploy, who is this, who is that, and all of that. But I'll probably want to come in because I'm investing, right? If I have to invest, I'm investing. I really want to be sure that what the DISCO is doing is actually going to yield the returns. You can't just, okay, if you also add instances where DISCOs will go and install maybe for political reasons and all of that, and you are not really getting the benefit. So those are some of those things that would require. Then also in terms of the meters themselves, I've mentioned the issue of AMI. Those meters has to be smart. And if I were to say, okay, yeah, what other things do you need? The regulator also has to come up with a national standard specification that all DISCOs must install smart meters, smart ready, smart enabled. You can't just go and just put one box there and say you have meters when you cannot even from your office know what the meter is doing and all of that. Then again, for the capacity, I think she already mentioned on the capacity side. I probably also want to do more due diligence, to actually verify that people who are going to be involved actually has the required capacity. Because the truth of the matter is, yes, phase 1 was meant to be in-country meters, but there were a lot of let me say maybe backdoor arrangements that and all of that. So as somebody who is if phase 1, if at all is going to come into play, I'll probably want to do more due diligence in terms of ensuring that, yes, the capacity is there, right? Unfortunately, I don't know how many meter manufacturers in Nigeria have the capacity to deploy smart meters. So probably this issue of local content, I think, is actually debatable. Like how many meter manufacturers in Nigeria can manufacture smart and enable smart ready meters. But I think the issue of capacity is something that really, really needs to be addressed on the production side, on the installation side, on the DISCO side, and all of that. Then also in terms of the lead time for deployment, I think that's also something that really, really needs to be addressed. We've talked about enumeration. You get there, there's no, you say there's a house there, you get there, there's no house there, and all of that. And then you're meant to deploy within 3 months, and you end up deploying within 7 months, 8 months. So clearly there were bottlenecks around that process that the DISCO is managing. And if it's so coming, I'll probably want to really sit along the entire value chain from the production to the deployment and really monitor those things. And the DISCO's involvement will actually have to be minimized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akim. And please, a round of applause. I think I want to start from one of the points where you raised, and we're talking about smart meter, and then maybe I will quickly go to field, and then I'll come back to the issue of the funding. I mean, my understanding of a smart technology is that it improves on probably the conventional way or the orthodox way of doing things, right? So I will imagine that if we're talking about all these losses due to theft and all these things, they should be minimized, if not completely curbed, when you're talking about smart technologies. For instance, my understanding of smart meter when you deploy it is that you can even monitor them remotely And some of them, you can even use them to track consumption and some of these things. And these data are available real time. So hearing this conversation around when they are deployed, that there's theft, there's all these things. Then the question is, are they really smart meters or there's something else? Because it doesn't or there are smarter people using smart meters. Maybe we'll get to talk about smarter people. But quickly, Phil, I just wanted to touch on the technology probably behind these things. How foolproof, or how can we say this technology can be, mitigate all this theft and all this thing that we're talking about? Maybe that enlightenment needs to be out there, and maybe there needs to be a complete shift from using dump meters, which I know that are not smart, and then the focus should probably even be on smart meters because they help us to mitigate this theft and all these other associated issues with losses. So maybe very quickly, then before I move into the conversation around funding now.
Yeah, by all means. So when we started talking to the discos probably about 3 years ago now to really understand the problem, we had a hypothesis that, by deploying smart metering, bulk metering, and overlaying that with AI monitoring, that we could solve or partly solve what's a very complex problem, let's face it, because if it was easy, someone would have solved it by now. And so we decided that we'd invest ahead of the time to really prove the point out. So our first project went live last July down in Anambra State, and by that we paid for and installed over 300 smart meters. But we were then monitoring those smart meters live by using AI. So we went from a situation where a community had no metering to a situation where a collection efficiency of around about 40%. This is the data from the disco. This is not our data. That we've moved today now to a collection efficiency of 100%, and we can pinpoint power theft or an anomaly in a data as it happens, and we can deploy that alert live, and that's deployed to an app, and it's followed up immediately by somebody on the ground who then takes photographic evidence with the coordinates that it's actually been done at the meter, and demonstration whether that is a theft or whether it's just an occurrence of someone traveling and there's a change in their usage pattern. So we're kind of confident that's proven now, that the smart technology will do that. The issue will become, what does that cost? And that's what we're working through now is okay, well, how does the return on investment of moving collection efficiency from 40% to 100%, reducing commercial losses down significantly, pinpointing where technical loss is happening, how do you now build that financial case out to go, actually, yes, there is an increase in cost at headline, but the overall long-term return on investment is significantly greater. The last point I'd like to make on that before we get into funding is, I spend far too much of my time talking to funders, private funders, of how they can bring funding into smart metering in Nigeria. They have a very, very clear blockage in their mind, which is, if I can't see a way of putting my money in and getting my money out, right, then the money's not coming in. And so we need to solve a way of them being able to get the Naira back out to dollars. And maybe that's another thing that the government or the CBN could help with in terms of long-term, how can investors get their money back out?
All right, thank you very much, Phil. So let me quickly come to Akim now, and then I'll still go back to Falaka. Now let's look at the issue around the funding, because it's important, because everything revolves around, like what you heard Phil said now, if funding has to come in, they need to know how this funding will go out. But I'm still of the opinion that we can start with what we have. So what are even the available funding opportunities? What are the local funding opportunities that we can even tap to get started before we start thinking of external funding? And then some of the bottleneck that is also highlighted around liquidity and FX issue is still like a very big elephant that everybody's unraveling. And I don't think it's even limited to this. I think it's cross-cutting. So, but let's look at what are the funding opportunities that are available in order to be able to roll out this meter in the scale that we want.
Okay, thank you. As you're asking the question, like you could say, I was just smile, like I don't know why this question of funding and all of that keeps coming to me. But I'll try and provide some feedback.
Just very, very, very briefly, because we were running
Okay, so
Nighttime.
so I'm going to address this as somebody from the financial advisory capital market experience, right? And one thing that is very critical is there is no lack of funding, right? What there is lack of opportunities, and what we know is, the capital will actually chase, go where there is opportunity. And yes, there are opportunities within this space, right? And what is very critical is that discos who eventually will be the ones, taking on those meta assets, has to be able to demonstrate to that if you invest in this, the return is going to come. Is going to come. Now we've had, the cap. We've had the map where customers are the ones funding. We've had, government also coming in. But I think we need to start having a shift of focus from, government funding or consumers funding to actually going into the capital market and start thinking of how do you raise funding, to finance this this meter. The truth of the matter is there's liquidity issues within the sector, and that creates opportunity for investors to come in. Now, like I said earlier, discos and the other operators within the industry really needs to show to investors that if you come into this space, there's going to be funding made available. We've had to raise, commercial papers 270 days, 360 days and cool. But if you're able to demonstrate that these meters, once installed, will actually improve your ATC and C losses, and will improve the financial position of the discos, I think investors will actually be able to actually want to come in. So I don't think there is a lot of opportunities for funding to come in, but the operators within the industry itself really needs to demonstrate that yes, there's going to be a return on and a return of capital. Once I put down my money that I want to invest.
Right. All right, thank you, Akim. Let me quickly go to Folake. Now, he's saying that Disco needs to demonstrate that there's this opportunity and then probably to be able to attract investment. I know on a good day, if Discos even have their liquidity on their own, they will be willing to, also take this opportunity on the table. But I know that you guys have a lot that you're dealing with at the moment. Well, what do you have to say to that? Do you feel that the investors are not convinced enough that this is a good program they can invest in, or do you feel the disco is not selling the opportunity to investors as much as he has said? That's why the funding is not coming in. I think it's a two-sided question. So whichever way you want to answer it, then before I go to Phil.
Okay, so I'm going to have potential investors listening to me. So it depends. What do you want me to say? So
they want to bring the investment.
So I'm still going to come back to you again. Then I'll answer this. You were talking about installers or discos, separating themselves from installers. Let me explain today so everybody understands. And also to change this concept about, because you put technology there, there's no theft. I like that you said that smarter people. Technology is supposed to enhance and improve efficiency and reduce downtime. So if I notice something, this person used to vent 10,000 or pattern, it shows you data, real time, but you have to still physically go there, which means that it can be bypassed. Any meter can be bypassed. Now, how does bypass happen? It can be after installation, I go back and bypass, or it can be during installation. As a disco, as a responsible disco, that meter is money for me. That is the singular most important thing to me. I'm not going to leave it to anyone. I'm going to ensure I know who is installing. I have a technology that can ensure that is installed back end to end. I'm not going to leave it. Understand that. And because if you understand that, you won't come up with a rule that would say disco should not. Why should I not be interested in something that is going to ensure I reduce leakages or I reduce leakages 100%. So please understand that, because it's when that is sure that the investor, I can show performance. I can show I'm reducing losses. Even when bypass is happening, I can show based on data how I'm quickly reacting, how I'm coming up with solutions to ensure that it is minimized or eradicated. And that's how investor can be interested. He spoke our numbers. He said from 40% to 100%, clearly collection will go up. But you would then have losses because what happens, like somebody was paying 10,000 naira, even though was consuming energy for 40 naira, the meter forces you to pay the real thing. You're not going to want to pay 40,000 naira. That's what we've seen. So they're going to think of creative ways. It's either they begin to consume or conserve their energy and be responsible for how they use their energy, or they will find a way of stealing from you. Those are two options we see. Or they're responsible with how they manage their resources. But with the solutions we've spoken about today, if there is funding available that can help us deploy the right type of device, build the right set of resources, you will reduce the losses, commercial losses. You will improve collection. If you improve collection, what that shows is that your cash flow improves. And what does an investor want to see? Where is the money coming from? If I put the money there, how do I recover my money? That's what you want to show the investor. And if the investor, we can prove that, but this is what I need to do that. So it's important we understand that. If we understand that perspective, then, but is there opportunity there? Yes, absolutely. Is power critical? 100%. The alternative, is it cheaper? No. Are they paying for the alternative? But they don't want to pay for you that is cheaper. They want to steal from you because they can't steal from the alternative. That's the truth. So that's my view. I don't know if that answers you.
A round of applause. This is where you say drop mic. Okay, so I think I'm enjoying the conversation, and I think it's quite robust. And then one of the things we're also doing is we're identifying the challenges, the bottlenecks, and then probably how we can kind of mitigate and solve all these challenges. And I'm also happy that there's some people in the audience here who I know that they are also key players in the sector, like myself. I work with development, cooperation, and I know that we try to remove market barriers. And I know there are quite a number of people who are here too, who could talk to some of the people who are key players in, resolving some of the issues that we've talked around. Because I had something around standard earlier on, and I'm wondering, okay, so there's metering code in the country. Is that metering code taking care of smart meters also, or is taking care of the old technology? I know that NEMSA is also doing quite a lot around metering, standardizing meters and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to hear from those people to see the role that they are playing in this, because one of the things we've also seen also over the years is there's not that sort of coordination where all the stakeholders are adequately mapped and they are all grouped together so that they can work together. So you then see people working in certain way, but there are other people who could support that particular initiative who are not part of that. So I'm hoping that this conversation will extend beyond even the people that are here that are engaging, to the CBN, to NEMSA, to NERC, to every other person that we have also highlighted who could also play a key role. Otherwise, it would then be seen as if you are the only one that can solve my problem. But he's saying that he's not the only one that can solve the problem. So very soon I will still open the floor for the audience. But since we're talking about funding, there's a particular question I want to throw out here, and probably I will start from like I spoke, I'll start from Hakeem now. There's a new metering scheme that is called the Meter Acquisition Fund. Are you aware of that? Okay, so you think so? Yes, so that means you're aware. So probably very briefly, 1 minute. Can you just tell us how does this scheme, how does it work? And then how can players, like Folake and then Stimaco and Mayfield and the rest, how can they benefit from it? Since we're now talking about funding, and then this is another funding opportunities.
Yeah.
How can they tap into it? Okay. And don't be political.
No, I'll just go straight to the point. So I think NEC in its wisdom has said that part of what they want to do is to levy the part of the tariff, like a particular component of the tariff will go into a metering fund called the Meter Acquisition Fund. And the truth of the matter is we've not really had that much of engagement. I think there's been engagement with its discourse, but on the part of Meristem or CBN, there hasn't been much engagement, but we definitely do know that there's going to be some, parts that we are going to be playing, in this. Currently, the discourse account are escrowed, and if the discourse account is escrowed, of course, there has to be a mechanism for setting aside that portion of the tariff, to go into this metering form. But in terms of the entire operation and all of that, I really don't have much information on that. I think Ms. Folake could,
Okay, so maybe
since
quickly,
she's an operator within this sector.
maybe Folake wants to chime on that then.
I think, like you said, is an acquisition point and is a fantastic initiative that the regulator has come up with. And that's because of the challenges we've seen with regards to the intervention, the current CBN intervention fund. So we don't want to stop the momentum, is why they came up with that idea. They've spoken to the discourse about it, and they've pretty much given us a general idea of how that concept will work, which would literally be, it will be taken, like there's a fund, it will be charged in the tariff. There'll be a fund manager that would manage the fund. The fund manager would then be able to raise additional fund to what has already been contributed, which will obviously be used to acquire meters. They are going to be involved in managing that, but I think it's a good idea. The stakeholders are talking, and I'm sure we'll be able to kick it off very soon.
And that becomes a bucket where everybody can then tap into, and then you're sure of a type of revolving fund that can continue to make the program to expand.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's just quickly, now we've talked about the funding opportunities and then looking at it, although I know that it's an unending conversation. I will want to move very quickly to Phil. Let's now look at the impact. We've talked about smart meters and we know that they play a very key role, but it's important for us to highlight it and then to enlighten everyone about the implication of, the financial implication of this lack of smart metering on the supply side management. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about it. What do you think, are the financial implications of the lack of smart metering on the supply side management?
We sort of talk costs of probably 8 of the disco now. We spent a lot of time and understood, their lower levels of power accountability. Right. So, what's that next to the leader? The biggest one that's probably invested the most and got the most advanced infrastructure, but that is not the same throughout. Throughout Nigeria, and we see very, very basic levels of investment in infrastructure, and so the impact is significant in terms of the financial health of the discos. But it's also significant impact on the citizen and economic growth of this country when you look at it, because the availability of power and what people are then having to do to supplement that availability of power through generators and like is when you look at it on the ground is significant. And so smart metering presents a huge opportunity to change not only how you distribute power and the confidence to distribute power, but we've seen live on the ground the impact at citizen and economic level. But what it also gives you is an immense amount of intelligence about what you do going forward. And much to Falake's point about strategic investment, about where you do invest and how you invest, because it cannot pay back to put an 80,000 naira meter into someone who's got an ARPU of maybe $80 a year. It just cannot pay back. So that forces us to look at the market differently, to say, can we bring in different types of meters? Can we bring in different types of monitoring solutions at a lower level to be able to distribute power fairly to those people as well? Otherwise, the country will grow at the availability of power to those that can afford it, and those that cannot will not grow. And so we see there's an immense opportunity to inform those types of decisions at disco level, at government level, and at regulatory level. So, but it goes back to, you have to have the data. And so I know a lot of the conversation today is about smart metering. Let's also focus on the data. So when we're legislating or putting regulation in place about the next phases, let's legislate around what data discos have to hold and how they might use that data, because that will then force them to put in the necessary infrastructure from a technology point of view to be able to use that data to inform how they make better decisions going forward. So I think that's probably how we see the market.
Right. Thank you very much, Phil. And then I'm going to open the floor for the audience in about 2 minutes, but before we do that, I just want to quickly hear Folake's view on the same thing. I mean, you mentioned something that was very critical the other time. The meter is a means for revenue collection. So that shows that there's a huge financial implication if this is not there. Do you want to kind of expatiate on that a little bit so that, you know, everybody knows that, you know, this is very critical, and then we need to do much more than just, you know, handling everything with kid club, because sometimes this is how it appears. So maybe just to piggyback on what Phil had said from Disco's perspective.
Okay, so we're a distribution company, we don't generate. And with even the new regime where our accounts are escrowed and on the waterfall, the Disco is last. For the Disco to even survive, because you're last, remember. And so if you bill a customer, let's say 90%, right? Billing efficiency, you already have 10% you've lost, and you only collect 80% or even 70%. That differential is going to hit the Disco straight, because today everybody takes their money first, and understandably so. So you are left to operate your Disco with what is left. So it is, thank you very much. That's someone that has experience there. So I'm painting a picture to say, if the Discos are going to grow, the Discos are going to take advantage of the opportunity that is there, then we need to really support the Discos to have the right infrastructure, but of course, strategically. So you're not just giving funds and deploying the funds or deploying your infrastructure, whether it's metering infrastructure, whether it's improving your network. It must be strategic, and it must follow a pattern that helps you optimize to give confidence in the in potential investor. But I think that example I gave shows a picture. I'll give you a classic example. February, typically, you know, every single day in the Disco's life is critical. For every day you miss out on, it has an implication. So you miss that, you can't collect that day, you can't really recover it. It takes you another 4 or 5 months to recover that day that you lost. So we know naturally that February is not 30 days. February is 28 days. So you plan typically for it. But this February was a very special February. 28 days, election, cashless, come on, all in 1 month. So
problems.
Literally, my Disco lost $1 billion. I put that there. What that simply means is that, remember, there's a cash flow, there's a waterfall. Everybody gets paid. It's automatic. If there's nothing left, there's nothing left. So what that means is that suppliers, operations for that month, in fact, we're in March now, there's no money to run the business. We are running it sharp. So that just puts it in perspective why it is critical and important. I like the fact that we're escrowed because it forces discipline, which was the idea in the first place. But the reality is the reality as well. And I think when people understand and appreciate that, so people that are stealing from you when you can't move, when there's election, you can't move, they're stealing your energy and they're not paying. Yeah.
Just wow. A round of applause for all our panelists so far. So let me move very quickly to the audience. I know maybe 1 or 2 of you have some questions. Let's quickly take that so that it's not just a question from this side. So please, can you just signify, and can someone help me out? Can you raise your hand so that I can see the number of people? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so to be sure. How come it's only guys asking questions? Okay, yes, there's a lady. So let's start with the ladies. You know, gender balance. It's still International Women's, you know.
Hello, very interesting and informative conversation. 2 questions quickly. I think the first one is around training. So I understood that there was quite a recurring theme around capacity building. Is there anything being done to ensure that people across the value chain, from the Discos, installers, are being trained same kind of standards? So that way, you know, the questions around we don't have the capacity to ensure we properly deploy is cancelled. Secondly, is around public sensitization from a consumer perspective. How well and how effective is that going? Ms. Foluke mentioned a lot of leakages that I think an average Nigerian knows about, but what are we doing about it? Thank you.
Okay, so do we want to take the questions? Okay, let's just take like maybe 2 more questions and then we can answer them together. Okay, so let's balance it. A lady, a guy. So, okay, let's take him, and then we'll take the next lady and then.
Yeah, thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Emmanuel from next year. Very interesting conversation. In fact, I'm looking forward to this kind of meeting. Quickly, I appreciate the angle Phil came in, because if you look at currently Nigeria today, we have almost about 35 to 38% customers that are within the 12-hour band, according to the structure of the market. Now, those customers largely are within rural areas where they identified as some of them, you could not actually go there to go and carry out maybe oversight functions on the meters. So some of what I would like to recommend basically is, while we want an injection of AMI-enabled smart meters across board, we should also be very sensitive as to the capacity of the customers to encourage the recovery of the investment cost. For instance, if you have a very rural community area where they don't have much productive uses and all of that, where the capacity to pay is quite poor, and they are probably within band D category, we could look for very cheap meters that can be used for the customer's points, then have probably transformer level AMI meters that can speak to the central AMI system that will ensure that, yes, they have some measure of remote oversight function on the energy monitoring side. So basically, my recommendation to the panelists and everyone is, while we are designing our metering strategy, either for phase 1 or for whatever phase we want to do, let's take into cognizance the cost of recovering, the process of recovering the money, because some customers today, the maximum they can afford to pay is 1,000 naira for energy, especially in rural communities. If you just suppose that to the cost of the meters, you see that they're going to spend almost 8 years recovering the cost. And from the metering code, we already have a 10-year gestation period for you to revisit these meters and possibly have them changed because they may be obsolete. So that already provides some form of challenges for you to be able to make profits, no matter how meager, from the meter. So we will recommend that approach should be considered for urban areas and probably band A, band B, band C areas. AMI smart meters spot on. But for these rural communities, which informs about 37% of our market, should be considered for this alternative metering approach. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it looks like a contribution than a question. But you know, when you mention the rural people, I'm just in my mind thinking, I mean, I work with the rural community a lot. They are very compliant people. I mean, I don't know. They don't steal electricity. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the villages I've been to, you know, they don't even tamper with the meter. You install them, they leave it there. Community people, very compliant. But city people, let's take the next question.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is really about how the collection efficiency is being calculated. And because Phil mentioned something about the data and how the patterns might actually be a signal for how people pay for the electricity, but what's the role of smart metering in also influencing demand side management? Because this could also be something that impacts the user behavior and patterns, and that also influences their consumption and probably their ability to recover the funds. So what's that role of like smart metering in demand side management, and how would this affect collection efficiency? So the second question I have is about these hard to reach areas where electricity theft is predominant or prevalent. What are the discos doing? Because electricity theft might also be associated with lack of connectivity. So I probably might not be connected, and I decide to connect myself, bypassing the meters and all other assets that are deployed to capture my energy use. So what strategy are they using to get into these communities and find out who is near to the grid but lacks access to the grid? And how are we going to capture that? So I'm really thinking in terms of like the strategic plan in deploying these meters as well. I think that wasn't really clear to me.
All right,
thank you.
Before we take other questions, let's take this one first. Okay, so I think the first question, the second person was more like a comment. So, but I think the first question we can start with that. Maybe we can start with Falake, and then we can take from maybe Akim, and then because if there's still time, we take from Phil. Should we do that? But let's do it very, very quickly because I think the question all of us can contribute to it. I think it focuses more on capacity building. The first question focuses more on capacity building.
Okay.
and stuff like
So
that.
for capacity building, I would say very quickly, at least I'm aware of at least two companies. Like one we work with is called ETC, where
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. They are trying to support the sector to provide. So whether it's the meter manufacturers, whether it's installers, they are providing that. They are training people and making those resources available to the relevant stakeholders. So that is happening. I think there's a question with regards to all of those leakages we're talking about. Some of us know how are we creating awareness. It's a continuous thing. I would say that is something we've been very deliberate about. But I can also tell you the flip side. I think that we cannot create awareness too much. Sometimes we have whistleblowers, we have independent companies that help us manage, the whistleblowers, so that we're creating awareness to people to say that if it's happening in your area, you can speak to this. We have different programs on radio, using social media platforms to try and continue to create that awareness. So that is an ongoing thing. I don't know if that kind of helps. Sometimes the customers don't want to hear about it. They're just interested in getting the power. So they're even like, please don't tell me about that. I'm not going to do your job for you. Go and get meters. Because what you're telling them is to tell you, you're telling them what a bypass looks like, or what the implication of a bypass would mean to them, and that they should pretty much whistleblow or tell you. And some of them are like irritated. Why should I do that? But we continue to communicate that.
So education, awareness, advocacy, all that has to continue. Phil, quickly.
Don't talk about it.
So in terms of capacity building,
Because now from OEM perspective, right now, because you guys have a lot of role to play in that regard, in scaling that capacity that's been mentioned here.
Yeah, so we're a software business, we're not an OEM, and we partner with OEMs, and so the way we've built our platform is that we can talk to any OEM that's a NEMS approved meter, then we can integrate with it, because we want to make sure that you can solve the legacy infrastructure as well as the future infrastructure. But in terms of capacity building, we've done two things, and I think it's important that as a UK business, we prove that we're investing in Nigeria, and so we've moved a significant number of our overheads from the UK to hiring people in Nigeria. And with our partnership with Nextier, they have allowed us to use space in their building to employ people here. So we've recruited a head of metering from one of the discos. We've recruited people with REA knowledge for the off-grid sector. We're recruiting a head of support, product support from a disco. So we're trying to get strategic investments, but we're also partnering with Rocky Mountain Institute, working with 4 of the discos to really help them to understand how they might use their data more in a more sort of intelligent manner to be able to improve the business metrics. And so that's a program that's going on for the next 3 years, and we're investing our time and energy into that. And we've already module on commercial loss detection and deployed that. So trying to be a market partner and there to be seen as trying to be part of the solution and not trying to just commercially benefit from it.
Thank you, Phil. Before I go to you quickly, I'm aware that there are people who joined us online. Please, you can just forward your question so that we can also take that as well. So very quickly, someone talked about data and talked about the demand side also. You want to chime on that so that, since you have talked about the capacity building, do you want to attempt that? Or otherwise, I pass it to. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Quickly.
Some of the questions.
Yes.
I think we need to comment some of.
Can we have volume on this mic?
I think we need to comment some of the operators in the metering space. When the issue of capacity came up, what I do now, I've listed 1 or 2 of the operators in that space, and they've actually started investing heavily when they saw the opportunity in terms of mass metering, and I think we're willing to give kudos to them. I think also I'm also aware that you have different development institutions that also invest in capacity building and development to scale up to expand knowledge of installers and all of that. So I think there's a lot of work being done in that space. There was also a comment from the gentleman over there on 38% of rural communities or there, but we need to face the reality. As an investor, my main goal is, of course, like, you could have development institutions and you could have like, somebody who is just out there to go and make money. If I'm going to be investing, say, 60,000, it's going to take me 10 years to recover versus putting it in the city that will recover the money. It's just practical sense. I'm not going to invest there. So we need to face that reality. And of course, I think that's where the regulator also comes in to try and balance that. But, from the finance parts, I'll probably not do that. We need to face the reality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Akim. So I have questions from online audience. I think, for like, I'm going to pass this to you. My question is, and I'm reading. Okay, my question is, what's the logical reason why customers must use their money to buy meters and Disco will claim the ownership?
Okay.
The person didn't put the name. Just. So the Discos, the customers are actually lending the Discos money. Okay. So they're just like a normal, just like CBN. CBN doesn't own the asset, right? It's just, we own the asset. So that loan will be paid back in form of energy credit. So it's actually the Disco's asset. Does that make sense? Yes. I understand, but it's just the audience that is. You have also explained now. Since you're independent. I'm the moderator. And since I don't work with the Disco, so I just thought, okay, since the question is for the Disco, let me just pass it to the Disco. Okay. Perhaps maybe I've also used my money to buy it, and the Disco is claiming ownership. You never could tell. All right. So thank you for that. So I think it's fine. So next question is smart metering a criteria by NEC for Disco to assess the meter intervention fund presently being developed? I think that I will pass that to you, Akim. So should I take the question again? Is smart metering a criteria by NEC for Disco to assess the meter intervention fund presently being developed?
Like I said earlier, we've not really been, in the know, but I would imagine that, is going to be a requirement, but I don't know, let the regulator, I think the regulator will be in the best position to speak to that. Okay.
You want who to speak to that?
The regulator,
yeah. But they are not,
maybe,
not here. Is any of you working with the regulator? Do we have the regulator in the house? Okay, so I think we will pass the question to the regulators. So they'll be able to comment on that. Okay, I think the other question is still related to this person asking about why should they keep ownership. So let's take like 2 more questions very quickly. I have very limited time. Okay, you raise your hand first. So I'll take 1 question here. Oh, now you're putting me on the spot, but okay, so quickly, this question, please, let's make it very snappy. Yes, 1 question, don't ask 2, 1, so that we can go around very quickly. Yes.
Does the development finance? Yeah, what role does development finance have in this to overcome some of the issues of challenges around solvability of the Discos, FX, and counterparty risk?
Oh, nice question. So the moderator gets to answer the question. That was not part of the brief. Okay, so very quickly, of course, development cooperation has always been playing a major role, especially in the aspect of improving electricity access, and then of course also improving infrastructure. And I know quite a number of us are working on different topics, right? I can only speak from my own program. I don't know about the other program. Of course, we are not focusing directly on the mass metering program, but I know that we're enabling the market and then we're creating comfort for investors. One of the key things that has been talked extensively here is about the risk in the market, and then how those risks can be, how we can de-risk the market as a whole. And I know that there's been a lot of effort on our own side by looking at what are the major gaps there that needs to be mitigated. What are the guarantees that, for instance, now in the solar sector where we're working extensively, we're already creating like some form of guarantees, that could be in place, in order to be able to give, assurance to investors to be able to bring money into the market, right? Because without that, then it's impossible for anybody to want to bring your money. We want to see how the money is going to go out. So that's on our side. And I know that there are quite a number of people probably who are also here to working on specific topics, So I couldn't say much about metering because it's not the core focus for us right now. But if you have asked me what we're doing in the in the mini-grid space, and then of course also embedding smart metering, for us it's a given. Any mini-grid that we are going to be part of, smart metering is a component. Because data collection and then assessing this data, evaluating this data, analyzing this data is very critical to market development. So we are doing that. And then that's giving the investors some assurance to say, oh, there's a cash flow here. Oh, theft is mitigated here. I can bring in my money to the sector. So probably that has to be scaled on a national level in order to be able to achieve this. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, thank you. So let me quickly go to yours. Very quickly.
My challenge is that I have some input and then I have a question.
So maybe we take the question. If there's still time, we'll now come to input.
That input, please. Period in which we released map and pegged the price of metering, custom duties for importing those meters went up, right? Wow. We have telco. The telcos, we have meters, SIM cards in these meters, and telcos were asked to stop allowing meters work if we have not connected. Is it NIM, right? So suddenly your NIN, so communication on the meters. So we had the CBN FX issue. We had, so there were just many things. And so it showed that there was a lack of industry cross sector. That's why I call it cross sector. So we do these meetings and we're focused on the power sector and our value chain, but we need to extend to cross sector, because what happens in the other sectors without knowing what's going on here can easily make the whole process fail. And if we don't consider that even in phase one or I know there's no phase one, but any quasi phase one, if we do not learn from those lessons, we would have the same problem. And now my question. I'm sorry. I've always wondered why CBN will keep giving loans, but they would not pay, but government will not pay their MDA bills. Won't I rather take my money first and know I have that to invest before you give me more loans? I've not been able to answer that question. So I have another question, but I think I'm going to.
So let's do that one so that we can still take one more question because we have limited time. Thank you. So who wants to answer that question? So your question is around MDAs not paying their bills and CBN giving loans. I mean, I love the input, very apt. Yes. I didn't hear that. That's now complicated. Well, I mean, you want to try? Honestly, I don't think anybody. Yeah, Folaga, do you want to try?
That I'm a beneficiary of the loan. It's okay.
To be honest, that question, I don't know who can answer that question. I mean, it's ironical, right? But it still boils down to one thing that we're talking about, this lack of integration, right? Among some of these actors or stakeholders, as we may like to put it, because I feel that if there's a continuous engagement, right? CBN will know that giving loans to continue to sponsor something that will not even make the loan to come back is an issue that needs to be addressed. But of course, since none of us is working with the government directly, and we would never know the reason why maybe things are structured that way, I wouldn't want to delve into that. But of course, I think it's an open question that maybe one day, if we have opportunity to have a sit down, I mean, someone like me, we meet with some of these people from time to time. I can even raise it that, oh, I was in a forum where this came up. But I would think that because every entity functions independently, you know, they cannot take their own decision on their own. And then the MDA defaulting, I mean, someone is responsible for that. So we can't even put it as a blanket that is MDA that is defaulting. Who is in charge of paying the bill at hand? So at that point, when the person is not paying, why is the person not paying? If there's no fund, why is there no fund? Where are they supposed to get their funding from? So, I mean, there are many other questions that question will lead to, but let's just not open the Pandora box, right? Let's just keep it the way it is. Let me go to the next question very quickly, please. I'll come back to if there's still time. Very quickly, yes. 1 minute, sir. 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I am Abdullah Ibrahim, an enthusiast in the energy industry, and also software developer, and mostly key into artificial intelligence and also data analysis. From my discipline and from the experiences I have is that once you have data, it gives you almost 80% the solution to your problem. And talking about energy theft, how have that data that you have gathered, that's from the source of electricity and other things, has been utilized in identifying clients or customers that are into energy theft? Because I believe with the data you can be able to break up this key sector where energy is being stolen. So the second question I have is that with the meters that you were proposing, that's the smart meters, the technology that it has, because one thing is that we Nigerians are the most intelligent people, and we always try to find a way around a solution. The current meters we have, some of your engineers have a means of devising a way to shorten or to lengthen, to shorten the what they've been called the meter, the lifespan of the kilowatts that is being given. If you are meant to, let's say, consume 1,000 kilowatt over a month, they know how to devise a means to minimize it, to lengthen it for a very long period of time. And also the third question I have is the smart meters that you have.
I will take only 2 questions because I don't have time again. I don't want us to overshoot the time.
Okay,
so I think the question
crucial.
is still around. I mean, there's been a lot of questions around theft.
It's very crucial. It has to do with the meters themselves. Do they have any software or interface that they communicate and relate back data to the people? I mean, to discuss and all this.
All right, thank you. Phil, you want to answer that very, very quickly? Yeah, I mean, it was a bit difficult to hear. I was hoping that.
But let me try to pick up what I think the essence was you know, is how the data from the smart meters you know, gets back, and you know, the type of meter. So the meters we're using and the meters that are used within the National Mass Metering Program, which are they're all NMMP approved meters. The key is all they are is a vector to bring data back for us to then use. The issue becomes how you then monitor that data and what models you might use to be able to pinpoint anomalies in that data that sort of pinpoint power theft. That's where the intelligence of what, you know, businesses like ourselves have worked on, working with the discos to understand how people steal power. So I guess my last point in all of this is that one of the biggest observations in the market is there is a lot of friction between all the stakeholders because there's losses, and there doesn't seem to be a joined up value chain approach to how we might address this, right from the point of where data is received from TCN, right down to the way the consumer uses that power to be able to pinpoint exactly where these losses are happening and how you detect that. That's something I would encourage happens, because it's certainly not happening right now. But certainly we're not doing black magic here. What we're doing is we are taking data and literally just applying that models to that data to be able to pinpoint events that would say something is anomalous there. Let's go and investigate it. And
thank you, Phil. Very quickly, I'm going to ask all the panelists to just give their closing remarks. But there's one question from one of the audience online. Metering is both healing and hurting to the power business? Can the regulation criminalize energy theft with stiffer penalties, including jail convictions? The stealing is killing. So that's a question. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but I think it's just for the regulators also to say they need to bring in more, consequences for people who are stealing electricity. And of course, the best way to do this, I think, ties to what we have all discussed extensively. Put the right infrastructure in place, do the right orientation, and then put the penalty in place such that, when there are scapegoats and people learn, probably people will adjust. But I think it's not going to be the problem for this just few minutes of conversation here. I think we need to take this conversation beyond this space. So very last thing.
May I make one point on that? Just one point is that,
and that would just be your closing remark. Yours is
so the question there is about sanction, right?
Yes.
Is what we have observed is where people know those meters are being monitored because any change in their behavior, someone knocks at their front door and says, "We've seen a change. I want to see if there's a theft." That is what is a prevention, is that they know those meters are being monitored, and that if they make a change, they try and tamper the meter or they try and steal power, there is somebody who's going to be knocking at their door. That is the prevention, because sanction is the final point, but you want to get to prevention so you're not impacting on revenue.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. Yeah. Prevention before sanction. Yeah. So we need to put those preventive, approaches in place, measures in place before we start thinking of sanction. Thank you for that. Folake, your closing remark?
I had a lot today. All I would say is that there's a lot of opportunity in this space. So I'm using this opportunity to once again say that if you invest at least in us, there's opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity there. First of all, there's opportunity in metering. There's opportunity in even franchising, for example, which is something that the discos are looking at to try and reduce the cost. We are open to anyone that has creative or innovative ways. You know what the problems are. I think the discos are desperate and they just need that support. But there's opportunity in this space, and I'm encouraging anyone that's bold, instead of just criticizing,
to take the bold step. Anyone that's bold, take the bold step. Thank you, Fulake.
Yes, thank you.
Akeem, very quickly.
I think there's a lot of opportunities, and from my experience, when the right policies are made, the right inputs are, the right incentives are given, like you see those improvements. And just speaking generally from our experience within the space, we've talked about disclosed escrow account and all of that. There's been a lot of discipline, backing what the CEO said, that there's a lot of opportunities within the space. And we ourselves, I don't want to start reeling out numbers, but those investments, despite some of those challenges that I mentioned earlier, we are seeing massive improvements in the discourse operations. So again, back to one of the questions that was raised online about criminalizing and all of that. While discos are actually the ones bearing that, I think it affects all of us, because once somebody steals, that cost is passed on to everybody in terms of higher ETC and sale losses and higher tariff. So I think we also need to start taking steps and start lobbying the National Assembly, not only leaving it to the regulator to say, okay, if you bypass or this, you pay 50,000, actually criminalizing it, because to us from the finance side, if I invest and you are stealing, like you are affecting my business. So we can also start lobbying and start criminalizing, because it's like you going into a bank to steal money, or coming into my shop to rob me of my investment. So we can actually start lobbying the National Assembly to start criminalizing energy theft, energy bypass, and any means that you are encroaching on the discourse revenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akeem, and thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for all our panelists. I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we have to draw the curtain on the event this evening. Honestly, it's been quite interesting conversation and robust discussion. I have learned a lot myself, and I'm taking up some of that assignment for myself also, because everybody has a role to play. And I love where you handed it, that the cost of stealing is for every one of us. So I think it would be nice to say we have to be our brother's keeper, right? I think the advocacy starts from us. I think I would like to close with a word of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, be the change you want to see. If we actually take the lead, I think it's just a matter of time. Every other person will follow us. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for having us this evening. May I just encourage all the panelists to rise. We will take picture and then I can hand over back to the next year team. So can we take a picture very quickly? Okay, please. Please, a round of applause for all the panelists once again. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Please, you can have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, it is. Good evening, everyone. The Electricity Hub would love to appreciate each and every one of you for participating at the HED Power Dialogue, because we have seen that technology is very important for the goal, the energy access goal. So we need funding to make these technologies to achieve the general goal. We would like to appreciate the panelists. And the Electricity Hub also love to wish Mrs. Folake Shoeton a belated International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day. And being the star of the show, I feel like she deserves a round of applause. Please clap for her once again. As a token of appreciation, the Electricity Hub sees the work every one of us are doing to improve the energy access goal. We would love to bid everyone farewell. We wish you a lovely trip back home. And there are refreshments at the back to suit yourselves. Thank you so much. Have a lovely night.